we are all thrilled to meet and converse with our highly esteemed speaker or our author for today. So, Early, who is the author on Spotlight today?
Thank you, Kelly. Indeed, we're very, very excited. I am personally both thrilled, excited, and also nervous because I can't get over the starstruck. Because it's no longer just a mock interview that we're having. For the very first time, Leap is bringing to all of us this opportunity to directly, in flesh, though virtually, talk to some of the most celebrated authors in the field of literature, and that is indeed like something to remember, for the rest of our lives. Yeah. So before I introduce her, I think I'd like to go down, a bit about go down the memory lane a bit, and recall how our literature classrooms were like, because I'm sure most every literature classroom that tried to discuss or understand feminism certainly, almost certainly, um, they would not have missed to discuss, in other words, her works. Her oeuvre, including the ever more relevant State of War and Twice Blessed, offer intriguing female characters that usually trigger discussions on the notions of what makes a woman empowered, not only in her narrative, but, in general. This usually spills over to our students and even ourselves, contemplating, ruminating about whether she finds herself in some of these women who've had like terrible experiences, fighting, just aiming for like a desirable world. She may be overseas, but it seems like whenever we read her works that she's just with us, because it doesn't fail to feel like she's one with our struggles, our pains, our hopes and dreams. She's a feminist, a human rights activist, a writer, and she's one of our country's literary gems. Ladies and gentlemen, teachers of literature and students of literature, I am very, very humbled to present to you no other than Miss Ninotchka Rosca. Hi, ma'am.
Hi, I'm trying to get my video.
Camera on. Okay.
Yeah,
I know it takes some getting used to sometimes.
I know this is horrible.
It's down below, ma'am, if I could help you a little bit. It's down below. Right there. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Hello,
Good morning. Good morning to you. It's 2 a.m. where you are. And I mean, thank you so much for finding time for us.
a pleasure as
My name
always.
my name is Early po, ma'am, and I will mainly be moderating, but just to introduce myself a little bit po, I am one of the many students of literature who remains intrigued by many aspects of your work, including, of course, the strong female presence in your works. I also can't help but sometimes still feel haunted by the brutality of having to be a female, having to be a woman, dealing with a harsh and strongly despicable social-political environment. Just for your information, we are joined today by students and teachers of literature, some of them very, very young as well. Some who, some are seasoned, some had been my teachers also. They were responsible for introducing you to me. So it's a pleasure to have them with us also. And we all are seeking questions on very important like themes, I guess, that revolve around issues of activism and advocacy, reading and writing literature, how we can teach, literature more effectively, and essentially really just breathing, literature, because we believe you are one person who lives and breathes like literature. Some of the questions are really interesting, and I'm gonna do my best to be able to ask all of these questions, hopefully, or most of these questions, hopefully. But to get started, because I'm sure you are also pining to answer and respond and deal with us already, we will start with some of the lighter ones, just to get, the ball rolling.
Okay.
And this light question is really about knowing you more, because personally, I've always been intrigued by your name, Ninotchka Rosca. It kind of sounds like of a mixed ethnic origin, and I'm sure there's a very like rich story behind that. So maybe the first question is if you could tell us a little bit more about um, the origin of Ninotchka Rosca, or maybe the extension is growing up as Ninotchka Rosca.
Ninotchka. Ninotchka comes from movie, Greta Garbo, 1930s. Uh, the film was based on the character of Alexandra Kollontai, who is, of course, the person who um, convinced Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov Lenin to declare March 8th International Women's Day. Can you imagine that?
I know, right?
It's so weird. Rosca, to my horror, I discovered was Romanian. When I moved here to New York, I got invitations from the Romanian clan of New York to join the reunion because there's only a very small group of Romanians in New York City, specifically the Romanian Rosca clan. And I was laughing because I have no idea if we had Romanian blood or anything. But one day, two persons came to my apartment and rang the doorbell and asked, we would like to see Mr. Rosca. And I said, there is no Mr. Rosca here. There is a Mr. Rosca. And they looked at me in horror. And then they left. But over the years, I still get invitations. So I have no idea. I would like to go to Romania and check out the Rosca clan of Romania.
It seems as if it's in your blood to actually, be mingled with with like all these kinds of, I don't know, political like future, because is my audio clear to your end, ma'am, somehow? Because my screen is saying my internet is unstable. I just wanna check.
It's fine, ma'am.
It's fine. Okay. All right. Yeah, I was just saying, ma'am, that, it seems as if it's in your destiny to live this like huge, like life that you're living in right now. So I guess the other like light, still in the light questions that I would love to follow up is because I saw in some of like the blogs and interviews that you had, that you said you read books like at least 4 times in a week, and a combination of like 3 light reading and a heavy reading. So I
Yeah.
would like to know, like, what would be like light reading and heavy reading for you?
Light reading would be science fiction.
Ah.
Heavy reading would be like a huge literary thing or philosophy or quantum physics.
That is literally like heavy reading to me, quantum physics. But in these like heavy readings, ma'am, that you've read, is there anything among them that actually you can consider to be specifically instrumental in shaping your, eventual career as a writer?
Uh, but I don't know if one could call Ursula Le Guin light reading, but I've read all her work. I
Yeah.
started reading her work when I was a teenager,
Teenager.
and yeah, uh, I met her finally.
Wow.
It was kind of crazy because I was introduced to her and I was so starstruck that I said, I am very sorry, but I really must say this. And she looked so alarmed because I was very intense. And I said, I think that The Left Hand of Darkness, her novel, is a great novel. And she went, and then she pulled my
Your arm.
my hand closer and pulled me closer to her, and she said, you know, you know, people think that writers, you and me, we writers, um, get too much of this. We are so used to it. But in truth, we never get enough. And me, I was like, oh my God, she included me in the we, you and I, we writers. I was like, that was
That's you being like starstruck yourself. Like, we can
yes.
relate like right now. You can imagine
Oh,
where we are right now, but we're except
yeah.
that like we hope to get there, like writers like you bringing us in the equation. We can just imagine. One of the questions that we
But
have from our
see,
participants have go ahead, ma'am.
okay. Now I was just saying that I've met practically
Like I
really
know, right?
monster writers with
Like
monster
giants.
reputation. But
Mm-hmm.
that was the only time I went insane with Ursula. Yeah,
Yeah, we only get to read her, and we still suffer reading her sometimes because she can be complex, right? Um, one of
very.
the one of the questions that we got from our participants, I think, well, most of them revolve around like your process as a writer, because like a lot of our young audiences right now are budding writers themselves. What would they're quite interested to ask what you would consider to be your strength as a
My strength.
writer.
My strength. Uh, I can turn a sentence in 32 ways. You know, handling the language is always
Right,
a major concern for a
right,
writer. That's
right.
one. And my other strength is an understanding of human psychology. I've read Freud, Jung, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
and psychology books
Right.
when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So those two together,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then the
Uh,
third, of course, is the politics of the situation.
right.
The
I
three.
think Yeah, I think on the third one we have like a very good follow up to ask in a little while. But just to maybe follow up on these three, in relation to a frequently asked question, on the notion of whether writers are made or born, would you say then that writers are made and all of these things that they can like work hard, be like writers that they want envision themselves to be.
Well, this is what I say because I get requests all the time to teach. I can teach you the basics
Mhm.
of writing in 8 hours flat, and I have done it. But I cannot give you the character of a writer.
Right.
Nobody knows why writers write. There was a psychology study, and the only conclusion
Mm-hmm.
that they came to was writers write the same way that hens have to lay an egg.
Mm-hmm.
Fertilized or not, the hen will lay an egg. That's
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, the character of the writer is pivotal
Mm-hmm.
to the process. Everything else can be studied.
Right. Right. And what usually gets to hone these characters also like the way that they deal with life's complexities, would you say so, ma'am? like to give which gives them
Yeah,
depth and
I don't really know. Nobody knows,
oh,
really. Nobody knows. It's a combination of genetics
right,
and environment and experience. Yeah,
right.
I
Um,
I I grew up being told children should not speak, so I took writing
right,
to my family's horror.
right. Yeah. And still this is on writing because a lot of people would really want to dabble on that. Maybe like others are working on building that character at this point. And some are in the technical aspect of it. And what usually gets in the technical aspect of like writing is dealing with writer's block. They're curious to
Oh,
know like how you get out of that, like what of writer's block, how do you get out of it?
well, you have to look at what started it. In my case, there were certain things I couldn't say, and so I kind of like put them in a footlocker in my mind.
Mhm.
But that kind of blocking can spread, yeah.
Mhm.
So you have to look at what started the block and then work to unblock it. And sometimes the very extreme emotional experience can unblock a block.
Mhm.
I'm right
Right.
now in a very frenzied writing seizure.
Yeah, we follow your Facebook and we kind of see that that's something that you could relate to at this point, even at this point. So it probably
Yeah.
would make like budding writers feel normal, like that they're in the normal like process of building themselves as writers. That it's okay and you can like there are ways to deal with them.
Mhm.
You mentioned in like your strength, one of your strengths would be like having to deal with the politics. One of the questions that came from our participants po is this one. Whenever you write a story or a novel, do your characters always allude to your significant political experiences? Because I think this has to do with, the typical approach where like students would associate author's life with what they're seeing in the work. So I think now they want to hear it straight from you if like you actually include or if your works. We can just surmise.
Actually, actually, the most important thing for me is the integrity of the narrative. I
Right.
will not twist a story to conform to a political paradigm. It's just that in the Philippines, when you're writing about the Philippines, it's almost impossible to not talk about
Mm.
politics. Yeah.
Mhm.
And especially if you're a woman, as they say, the personal is political.
Political.
Yeah. So even if you're talking about the personal, there are overtones of politics.
Mhm.
Yeah. But the thing is, I do not try to politicize the work.
Mhm.
I
Right.
let the politics come out through the narrative. Yeah.
Mhm.
Is that clear?
Yeah, that's very beautiful. Letting, I mean, letting the politics, hold on,
What happened?
hold on. All right. I mean, I think to me, it's very meaningful because, it tells you that the work that you're dealing with, whenever we deal with your work, is something that's not trying to manipulate us into anything or,
Oh,
not trying to
no,
indoctrinate people because
no.
that, there's always like that subtext. So it really feels good to hear that the integrity of a narrative is important and we
Oh,
have to be
very,
able to, as readers, see that, right?
very
Um,
important.
yeah. I think the next question, ma'am, is still related to that. And also now it's going to your activism, because one of the things that you're notable of is your the your journey towards like fighting for and protecting human rights, and particularly the rights of women and those who identify as women. The question is, how is the experience of exile, because this is something that we are usually like generally aware of, how you had to be away, right, because of the politics of the time, right? How would your experience of exile, or how is your experience of exile instrumental in both your career as a writer and as a transnational Filipina?
Uh, as a transnational Filipina, I had to pay attention to the issues which impact us in the United States. And so I went into my organizer mode
Mm-hmm.
because I was also trained as an organizer. I was still very young. And so we set up a firm,
Right.
the organization. And the thing is that uh, working with women's issues is quite different from working with, let's say, class-based issues. Most
Mm-hmm.
of the ideas about class struggle, class thing, class
Mm-hmm.
that, most of these ideas are already codified.
Right.
They're already uh, set down. Okay, but dealing with women's issues is like a very creative process.
Mm-hmm.
And you can come up with new ideas, new approaches to organizing, and a new way of looking at history. For instance, I'll show you my t-shirt. This is an affirm t-shirt, and this was the
Mm-hmm.
slogan for our
Re-
uh, can you see that?
revolution, women's liberation revolution,
Women's liberation complete.
complete the revolution.
Yeah. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was the slogan of our last assembly, National Assembly. And it's something that has not been articulated, you know, in politics. So there's a huge space for innovation,
Mm-hmm.
creativity, and finding new ideas and looking at the world with uh, fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, ma'am. I was trying to like really wrap my head around that, because one of the things that you mentioned have to do with the sort of like the intersectionality when we talk in the classroom about issues of women. Sometimes we can't help but associate it that like all the time with its intersectionalities, like that of class, like that of ethnicity and all that, and race and all that. But what you're telling us now is how the women, like women, like issue in itself is actually a whole what do you call it, like it's a whole in itself, and how even up to this day it has not really been completed, because we have to like turn, like use our fresh like perspectives and realize that women have not been fully liberated. Is that also the message?
We haven't even started liberating women. Uh, the very concept of intersectionality was developed by a woman.
Right.
Actually, I marched with her uh, during the Million People's March when all the black people were being, black men mostly, were being killed in the United States. And I was asked if a firm would join a women's collective of black women. And I said, only if we carry the names and photographs of the Black women who have been killed by the police. And so it turned out we were the only contingent in that huge demonstration who carried the names and the photographs of the women. So everybody was taking photographs of us. Yeah. And how in this vast outpouring of outrage against police killings in the United States of Black people, we think we were the only ones who carried the names of the women. Think about that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
And
just
then, whereas, you know, and the originator of the concept of intersectionality was marching right beside me. Yeah. So that was fascinating. People use this intersectionality, but this was developed as a concept
mhm,
of women
right.
and of feminism.
Mhm.
Everybody talks about, yeah, it's more, they say it's more important, the class issue is more important. The center of
Yes.
intersectionality is the
Right.
person, the
Right.
woman. Oh, now you got me like talking like a
Did we just lose
political.
Mamu's internet or did I lose my connection?
Hello,
Hello?
We can hear you
hello.
clearly.
Ma'am, we just lost you a little bit for a while. I think we missed the last part that you said. So you were saying the center of intersectionality is the person, and then we lost you.
It was developed to look at the kind of burden and
Right.
kind of oppressions that a woman carries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I needed to breathe a sigh because I like all I thought like personally were halfway there, but like hearing that from you who is directly marching for our cause is a little tough to to accept because we you want to believe that we've come we've marched a little forward since the 20th century, but when we think about it, you are quite right. We're missing sometimes the point because now we're like putting things together, maybe like mingling all of these like various social political sufferings, and then we
Mm,
don't get to the issue anymore.
yes, correct. Everybody is screaming intersectionality and
Right.
vanishing the woman.
Right.
This
So
is
that's, I think, a note for all of us, teachers and students of literature, to pay attention, I guess, to pay attention on, not just the things that we're reading, but also the realities in which most of these fictional characters really are rooted from, and see like oppression that's rooted from the personal, I guess, struggles. I guess that's also one of the other things we could help, you know, march the cause forward.
mhm.
Yeah. Ma'am, we have one question from the participants, which is something that I think also relates to this notion of, women liberation and I guess being a feminist in particular. She wants to
Okay.
ask because for context, she is, I think, I don't know, in China or in Mongolia, I don't know exactly where, but she's saying that in her context, Genghis Khan is a hero, considered to be a hero or believed to be a hero instead of a tyrant. So she wants to ask how can she embody feminism while being an immigrant worker in such a predominantly patriarchal society?
That's that's hard.
I know.
That's hard because she's not. China is not the only patriarchal place where our OFWs work. Yeah,
Right.
you can talk about the Middle East. You can talk about Kuwait. Me personally, I oppose the labor export policy, and I have
Right.
opposed it since the 1990s. And in particular, I oppose the policy of sending our women to become basically servants. I mean, we can dress it up with all kinds of euphemisms, domestic
Right.
work, etc. Servants, they're servants.
Mhm.
A woman in a patriarchal family is very vulnerable. And we have seen this in the number of women who are assaulted, murdered, disposed of, etc., all over the world. So they, I, it's time that we wean the nation from dependence on the export of labor. What is labor export? It's slavery in disguise.
Mhm.
It is. I mean, I was one time I had to stay up for 2 days, not sleeping, because somebody got in touch with me and said there are 5 women being held imprisoned at the UAE by the labor recruiter. And I said, I will help if there are Filipinas among them. They said, 2 Filipinas. And so I was working with India, Ethiopia, and so it was round the clock. Yeah. We finally got the women out. And the mother of one of the women got in touch with me to say thank you. But this happens all the time. It is not rare.
Right.
It's not rare. And I'm very sorry that the contracts that the government, the Philippine government, signs with all these government, other governments, do not specify uh, protections
Mhm.
for the women. They're mostly interested in how much money you can get. Oh, now you got me started.
I know, right? And I'm already starting to tear up, because I can't imagine the plight. Um,
Yeah.
the reality, it gets real. It gets more and more real. Uh, yeah, it's hard to follow up on that. Because I'm sure, ma'am, you have met a lot of like cases where, um, you know, you had to contend with forces that are beyond, beyond you, right? Like with
There are no
justice
forces
systems.
beyond me. But
I love that.
it's not only this thing about being physically oppressed,
Right.
being imprisoned, restrained, but the psychological impact on the women of being perceived as an asset,
Mhm.
a family asset, and being, sent into a life of exile. Exile, I always say, is not for the faint-hearted. I have met
I can only imagine.
many. I've met. There was one woman here who, young girl, about 30s. She was so scared that she she would move to a room and just stay there. Even if the place is not conducive to her well-being or anything, she was so scared to move. People are really exile is a kind of psychological battle every day.
Right. You never get over it, no, ma'am. It's like it keeps going. Um,
Oh yeah.
I'm still, ma'am, on like these struggles that our female like women have to go through, being of course our like labor, I guess, main labor, right?
Expert.
Export. I can't really put it better. What, like, if you have, because we have young students here who are female, and the thing is they're mostly in school, but some of them are also preparing to be teachers. Because there's nothing much at the moment that we can do about how the government is remedying that issue. What is this thing that you probably have been meaning to tell young women about having to navigate this very tough world?
I guess I knew. I was myself, at a loss and confused, but I was trained as an organizer, and
Mhm.
so in the Philippines. So when I got to the United States or any strange place, my first action would be to analyze the power structure of the place
Mhm.
and see where I can go. Where do I want to go to? Like, I want to be published. How do I get there?
Mhm.
You know, so I analyzed that.
Mhm.
So one of my first acts in New York City was to organize the Filipino writers. There was
Mhm.
no organization, so I organized it. And yeah, that
Okay.
kind of thing.
That's very
So
practical.
it's how to maneuver in a strange society. It takes a lot of being rational, not being emotional, being rational, being objective, knowing
Right.
what your goals are, very important,
Right. Right.
and how to get there, and finding out how to get there.
Right.
When I got here,
Right.
nobody was,
That's
no Filipino
right.
was being published.
Right. So, I mean, I hope that our young students are listening. So, they know that the importance of like what we're trying to tell them about having like a real clear set of goals, because I think that's one of those things that's missing. That
Mm.
very practical element of like where do you want to get yourself to,
Hmm.
and just like getting lost in the flow of the moment sometimes. How that
And
is vital.
especially if you are in a very advanced capitalist formation.
Right, right,
New York, you can get lost.
right.
When I first got here, 2 years after I first got here, oh my God, there are like 4,000 nightclubs in New York. So
Mhm.
everybody was going to, we had Prince, Michael Jackson,
Mhm.
etc. Yeah, but me, at 11 o'clock, I had to go home. And there were some like people who got lost in this thing.
Right,
Very easy to get lost.
right.
And then, of course, the other thing is the emotional burden of being in exile and alone.
Mhm.
And sometimes I met this woman was who married somebody who was in prison because she was lonely.
Mhm.
When the guy got out, they got married, and I was like, "What was he in prison for?" And she said, "Murdering his wife."
Doesn't sound like a really rational choice there.
I was like, "Dai, ano ba yan?" you know,
Right. So how do
crazy.
you so ma'am, how do you deal with that? Speaking of, like, how do you deal with the emotional burden of, being in exile? Like, apart from reading, as I assume, reading and writing would be like your constant, but how else does Ninotchka, spend her day, maybe?
How does Ninotchka spend her day? I have a very strong network of friends, quite strong. Not many, few, but they're always there. And then, of course, I am in a national women's organization. I post something like, I'm too busy to cook, and they will order food sent to my house. And then
Wow.
of course there are like, I have readers who are, I, they're very caring
Mm-hmm.
readers. Yeah. And one time I posted, I can't buy this tea kettle, and because
They
I keep
sent it to you.
burning. Yeah, they ordered, somebody from Australia ordered it for me.
Wow.
Australia. So I'm very careful now about posting what. Maybe I should
It might
post.
get sent.
I need a Porsche.
Exactly. I was gonna suggest something like that. No. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Very very interesting because it baffles us sometimes how like like someone of such a stature like navigate their daily life. It makes you more human to us now. Um, uh, we still have a lot of questions. I think I'm permitted to ask one more last, and then we could maybe ask our participants because we want to give them that chance also to ask you, ma'am, like personally. But like if like one last question from me, I want to bring it to literature teaching because I mean that's what we all do, like those of us who are here. One of the good questions that we got is if you have any opinion on the direction that teaching literature teaching should pursue given the socioeconomic and political turmoil that the country is facing. I guess the more specific context of that would be, living amidst historical distortions and information crises. So, like, what's the role of literature?
Literature is lived history.
I like that.
Historical writing sums up our national experience. But literature expands that, goes into of how it is to be human in a specific political situation. You don't find that history
Right,
in historical writing.
right.
That's like date, time, etc. But how do we feel when we lose an island? How do we feel? What does it do to us when our language is being replaced
Mhm.
or our culture is becoming something else? How does it feel to see our seashores covered with tourists? And I lived in Hawaii for some time, and I will tell you, the native Hawaiians hate the very sight of Waikiki. The beach covered by all tourist
Mm.
spots. Yeah. So what happens to your habitat when it's perceived as a source of profit rather than your residence,
Mhm.
your home? So how do you feel about that?
Mhm.
That's what literature gives to you.
Right. And there's no alternative way to know how to feel but to read. To read and yeah. And sometimes that's our like very first challenge. It's getting them, to read because they read something else. I mean, that's still supposed to be good, but
You know,
um
you know, you know, I had a teacher in high school, and she came only once a week. I think she was like a jerk or something,
mhm,
but it was substitute or something. But once a week, she would read one chapter from this novel. Every week, she would read it aloud. It was a great pleasure
Right.
And I think I grew up without SOCMED, TV. TV came later. I grew up with Kwento ni Lola Bastian on radio. I grew up like listening to stories. I think for people, one of the best training to teach people to read is to teach them to listen. Filipinos are very poor at listening.
Yeah, at least it didn't have to come from me. Right, no. Yeah, but you just mentioned one very, very practical strategy. I think in the audience with us right now are some of my students. And
Yes,
we talked about the value of reading aloud, which is being overridden by now technology. So I hope that we realize how sometimes we remain to be our capital, we remain to be the most important capital in the classroom. And maybe we can just do that, right?
yes.
What your teacher used to do. All right. I'd like to
We
ask
we
now
did we
our
did
participants.
okay.
Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead, ma'am. Go
Well,
ahead.
we did a marathon reading of Jose Rizal, No Limit Ángeles,
Right.
36 hours.
That's like binge reading if you think about the the current
Yeah.
lingo. Okay,
It was something that literature classes can hold.
right. Yeah, and speaking of Rizal, he's really really quite interesting now to a lot of our youth because of this like show. Yeah, but I think we really want to provide this chance also to our participants. So is there do we you could put your questions on the chat, and then we could, like, because this is your chance, guys, to talk to Ma'am Ninotchka Rosca over here. So if you guys have like questions which we were not able to ask today, you could raise your hands or like use our chat. But like as we're waiting, I guess I don't want to waste time. So as you are like writing that, um, maybe I could ask a little bit more, and we're waiting like while we're waiting for you. Okay, I hope that's a good deal. Can I get a thumbs up to our from our audience? You may raise your hands if you guys. So we're getting a thumbs up button. I'd like to know how you guys are feeling at the moment. You could use the chat to maybe like express to us in terms of emoji how you're feeling, or maybe like say anything directly to Ma'am Ninotchka over here. There's a question, ma'am, from Patrick. Sir Patrick, would you like to personally like unmute and to ask this question to Ma'am Ninotchka? Just to give you an experience of a lifetime. Just here in chat, like I
Hi,
think
Patrick.
he's a little shy now. But his question is, when are you visiting the Philippines for a book tour? So they're not contented, ma'am, seeing you here now. They want to see you in flesh. I mean, you can understand that.
I might this year.
Wow. I hope it coincides with our international conference.
When is that?
This is going to be in October po, ma'am.
Ah,
So this is for the information of everybody. We're working on bringing it in like one of the regions here in the country, in Palawan specifically. Hopefully it coincides with that like schedule when you come to the Philippines. So we could bring you there with us.
sounds
Any
exciting.
I know. Any other question from our participants? Come on, be bold. Like Ninotch is over here. Carlos Inigo is raising his hand. Go ahead, Carlos, unmute, and maybe you could turn your video as well.
Yes, hello ma'am. Good day to you po.
You could
I'd
say
like
your
to
name, where
ask,
you're from.
I'm from Quezon City in the Philippines.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'd just like to ask you if you could share to us any other female writers, or any notable works which, can give us a deep impact on fighting for women's liberation, as you'd say.
Oh, does it have to be Filipino?
Carlos, there's a follow-up. Go ahead.
Does it have to be Filipino?
No, hindi naman.
No.
There is one book.
This is the
I will
moment when
get
we all like take notes, guys. Griddling.
Gerda Lerner started out as Marxist, and she started doing research on women's oppression and ended up with this book. Gerda Lerner almost single-handedly created the concept of women's studies. She started it.
Carlos, is that good for you, or are you also looking for literary text that you could use in your class, or are you okay?
That's
Apart
good
from
po. Thank you
art.
very much.
All right.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Yeah. The follow-up question to that would be if that's available on Shopee. So you could get it. So you could find the book. All right, maybe in Amazon. So that's the first question. We can have a second one. There's a question here from Joshua, who is a former student of PNU. Joshua, Emmanuel, would you like to, personally ask this question? We could unmute you. Of course, I just couldn't see you on the names. Just here on the chat. So, Ma'am, Emma's question is, what is your take on the current political trend in the US where early childhood schools are pushing gender pronouns in education?
Oh, that's a very controversial
Right.
issue
Issue.
nowadays. Because it's not just a question of pronouns, but it's also connected to the use of puberty blockers on children, which is really difficult to accept because what there are many side effects to the use of puberty blockers, and they're being used in some instances for on children as young as 11 or 12. Yeah. So this is something that is being discussed. And then, of course, the medicalization of the gender issue is a major concern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's actually a really loaded question, Eman, if you think about it. There's a lot going on because it's a controversy in the US.
Yeah. I have no objections to whatever gender a person wants to present themselves, as long as they are adults and they can make the decision
rationally,
complete with information.
Right. Right. Eman, is that give us a thank you. Eman says thank you, ma'am. Okay. I think we can accommodate one last question. Sorry, but I'm not really selecting. This is random. Brycel, would you like to ask ma'am personally your question? Or We're not hearing her.
Hello, good
There.
afternoon. Am I audible po?
Yeah, please introduce
So,
from which institution you're from or school.
hello. So, my name is Reza. I'm from PUP, Santa Mesa. So, good afternoon, everyone. My question is, nowadays, there are a lot of people who does not have interest in reading. There is a disinterest of people towards reading. So, as a literary major, as a student taking literary studies, what advice can you tell us for for us who are getting discouraged by the current disinterest of people towards reading po. Thank you so much.
Ah, on the one hand, I see all the book fairs, no, in Manila,
Right.
and they're pretty well attended, very well attended. So I don't know if this is really a general state of thing or is specific to a certain category of people of the population. Uh, Actually, in the United States, there is a boom, uh, reading boom, really. Uh, all the newspapers, their circulations have increased. And people are moving away from social media
Wow.
because it's boring,
Wow.
really boring. You don't, it is good for learning certain factual things, but providing an insight into existence is different. So, how do we deal with this absence of an audience? It is said that every book, before it is written, has no audience, and every book creates its own audience. So, therefore, we should write more books so that the audience will increase. And we should write books in a huge variety of topics,
Mhm.
not only the specific thing or this one. We tend to be like very thematically narrow in
Mhm.
our literature. It's always about, where is the story of joy? Where is the book about living a life as a fishing person? Where are all of these things? There's still so many stories that we need
Waiting to be
to write.
discovered.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So Brycel, don't lose heart, just keep redoing what you do, read, like never mind like if you think there's like this disinterest, because for all you know, they're just not holding maybe the right book for at the moment. At because there'll always be that one book that will turn their life around, and yeah. I guess that's about the time that we have.
You're
And let
very
me just get
welcome.
yeah,
Bryce
Bryce,
thank you.
right. But I think we've come to the conclusion where we have to, like part ways. But maybe we will get to see more of Ma'am Ninotchka. We will try to have more sessions maybe with her. So like personally, ma'am, I'd like to say thank you for making time for us. Because this is really meaningful. This is something that we can, take forever. I personally would. So thank you. And I really hope to still meet you in person in the future. And yeah, talk more with you about you and your work. So I thank you, ma'am. At this point, I'd like to request
Thank you.
our president to provide some synthesis.
Thank you, Early. Through our conversation with Miss Rosca today, we learned what made her a great writer in the first place, that she is a prolific reader of different genres and subjects like sci-fi, philosophy, quantum physics, and no doubt she's a fan of Ursula Ursula Le Guin. No? So for the writers here, no, you know that the first thing that you really have to do is really to expose yourself with a lot of reading. no, not be very selective, because look at what it brought, or what it how Ninotchka Rosca came to be now because of these exposures to different books. We learned that for us to be an excellent writer, also we have to know how to turn a sentence into 32 ways and understand the human psyche, which totally resounds in the narrative style of Miss Rosca. If ever you've read her works, you know very well she's an expert of capturing our human psyche and injecting inevitable political realities, which she said she allows to surface naturally in her works. What struck me the most when she said that building the character of the writer is central, even if many factors influence a writer. And I think it's my first time to hear it, no, that okay, after all, it's not really, that being a part of so many writers workshops, but building that character in you first, in the first place. And though she mentioned that we are still far from a complete women liberation, because we continue to sugarcoat women's slavery even until now, she said that there are creative and innovative ways to fight for women's liberation. She advised us to never lose our goal and always be rational and objective, and not to get lost in a sea of influences. She advocates for literature and literature education that is grounded in the political situation of the country, and more importantly, what people feel amid political situations. With all these nuggets of wisdom and literature and inspiration, thank you very much, Miss Rosca. I know it's 3 a.m. right now, ma'am, but you stayed up late for us to spend precious time with us. We hope to support you also in your future works and advocacies. And please feel free to post whatever you need. We might, be able to speedily send you what you need, all right? Like your favorite food or whatever. So feel free to do so. Muli, maraming salamat po sa lahat ng dumalo, no, sa unang event
Sure.
ng LEAP ngayong 2023. At sana po hindi po kayo magsawang sumuporta. Kasi at sana hindi po itong huli, no, dahil magsisimula pa lang po tayo. Nagsisimula pa lamang tayo sa ating mga proyekto. Papunta po lang pa lang po tayo sa ating exciting part, no? Sa susunod na linggo, makakadialogo naman natin ng multi-awarded Filipina poet na si Miss Merly Alunan. So sana po ay magkita-kita muli po tayo ng 2:00 ng hapon via Zoom. And as early as now po, we would like to invite you already to our first face-to-face event after 4 years. Imagine that. And sana makasama rin po natin si Miss Rosca doon. No? So the 3rd International Conference on Literature Education with the theme Sustaining a Resilient Literature Education in a World of Disruptive Change, o pagpapanatili ng matatag na edukasyong pampanitikan sa mundong nagbabago. Happening from October 26 to 28, 2023 in Palawan. Right? Excited na ba kayo? No? Ready na ba ang mga swimsuit nyo for El Nido? But i-ready nyo muna yung papers nyo, no? Bago kayong mag-swimming. Okay? So we will be posting the complete details and releasing our call for papers soon. No? So please also like us on Facebook and Twitter, and visit our website leapphil.org also to get to know more about our organization. Panghuli po, inaanyayahan ko po ang lahat na maging miyembro ng aming lumalaking organisasyon. Magsisimula po ang aming membership cycle ngayong Hunyo. Nasa chat box po ang link, no, para po kayo magparehistro. So, may we request everyone po to open our camera, no, so we can have this golden opportunity to have this photo with Miss Ninotchka Rosca. On cam po tayo lahat. Sir Robert, please give us a cue.
Yes po, let's wait for everyone to turn on their camera first. Sige po, antayin po natin para hindi naman masayang na kasama natin si ma'am sa panel ng ating picture. We will be posting all of your pictures po in our Facebook page po. Sige po, let's just wait for... We have 3 panels po. Okay po, let's take a picture. First panel po. 1, 2, 3, smile. Next panel po. 1, 2, 3, smile. And the third panel po. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay po, marami pong salamat.
Maraming salamat po sa lahat at magkita-kita po muli tayong next week po, next Sunday. Maraming salamat po and enjoy the rest of your weekend.